Hey, how's it going, friends? Thank you for tuning in to VR Revelations. Welcome. It is October the 7th. And last night I was up late on social media, and it looks like a major attack was launched by Hamas at Israel. There's videos all over social media. It hasn't stopped trending up until now. On X platform, what used to be Twitter, and pretty much all over right now. And, this is huge. There's horrible videos of the attacks, of these Hamas militants entering into Israel, shooting people on the streets, thousands of missiles being launched at Israel. So we really hadn't seen an attack like this for quite a while, and Israel has declared war on Hamas, so they are currently in a state of war. So this is major developing news, maybe not on the scale of Ukraine just yet, but it could get even worse. We know just how tense the situation has been between Israel and Hamas, with the whole situation there on the Gaza Strip, this conflict between the Palestinians and the Jews. And so, again, I want to touch on that matter so it's clear to anybody watching here why this has been going on for so long. Well, we really have to go back to, more recent history, World War II. We know that Nazi Germany tried to exterminate the Jewish population. We know that was one of Hitler's ultimate goals, and he saw the Jewish people as pretty much an arch enemy of Nazi Germany and a major threat to them. So he had this ideology, and he wanted to exterminate the Jews, and he killed, as we all know, around 6 million Jews. He almost completed his objective, but eventually he was defeated, and there was still a Jewish population dispersed throughout the world, pretty much, until after the war, the United Nations, I believe, gathered, so all the allied nations, and they decided they were going to help the Jewish people because of how much they suffered. And so they chose to give them a place to settle, which was in the land that we now know as Israel. Now, at that time, it was only the remaining Jews that were able to escape the persecution of Nazi Germany. And so the majority of the population in the land of Israel were Palestinians. Now, of course, the Jews had the support of the United Nations, and after, the course of time, the Jews actually, they multiplied. They multiplied, their population increased, and eventually they actually, started to become the majority there, and they pushed out the Palestinians. And so now the tables sort of have turned, and we know that, there's only a small population of Palestinians, for example, in that little strip of land known as the Gaza Strip, which has been the focal point of a lot of these, military exchanges and things like that. And, no nation is innocent. Israel certainly is not, innocent of I would say, injustices against those Palestinian people there in the Gaza Strip. But, this is why all these Muslim nations that surround Israel hate Israel. That's why they think that Israel is not a legitimate nation, because of this short history, right? Because the Palestinians used to be the ones that lived there, because they used to have, the majority of the population there. And really, what has helped Israel become the nation it is right now, it actually holds nuclear weapons, so it is a nuclear superpower, so they can literally destroy all of those Muslim nations surrounding them. And this is due to the fact that, since that agreement or that consensus there by the United Nations, they have always been supported by the United States and the United Kingdom. And really, when you delve into the matter, the reason the U.S. and the United Kingdom has always sided with Israel is because of Israel's link to the Bible. The U.S. and the United Kingdom are Christian nations, Protestant, or at least, they label themselves as that. And they've always sought themselves in that way, as Christian nations helping Israel, who are also part of, biblical narrative. And so they sort of see it as their duty to help Israel. That's why they have never really sided with the Muslims. Now, if we jump over to this tension between Israel and these Muslim nations, such as Iran and Egypt, and pretty much all of the Middle Eastern nations there are Muslim, right? Except for Israel, where they are Jewish. They have their Torah, essentially the Old Testament. And interestingly enough, all of these religions are known as Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, because they all believe in these biblical figures, especially Abraham. Now, if you've read the Bible, Abraham is one of the major biblical figures. We find him in the book of Genesis. It was actually him who God chose and made a covenant with Abraham, and he told Abraham, that he would make him a father of many nations, that he would make his descendants as the stars of the sky, as the sand of the sea. And so we read in the Bible that God made a covenant with Abraham, and that out of Abraham many nations would come. Now, not just Israel and the Muslim people, but pretty much all of the people of the world. That was truly the promise that God made to Abraham. But the Muslims, they trace their lineage all the way back to Abraham. However, God had made a promise to Abraham that he would have a son by whom he would continue to keep his promise through. And we all know that, well, if you've read the scriptures, that Abraham had two sons, Isaac and Ishmael. Now, according to the Bible, Isaac was actually the son of the promise. But Isaac was actually the younger brother to Ishmael, because Abraham's wife was actually barren, and so they really didn't see how this promise would come about. But of course we know that God works miracles, and so he would work a miracle in Sarah's womb to bring about this covenant he had made, right, and carry on the promise through that son. However, Abraham and Sarah, waited long before the promise came, and so they actually got desperate. And in order to, find a shortcut, Abraham's wife had an idea. Now, this wasn't maybe that strange back in those days, but Abraham's wife actually advised Abraham that in order to fulfill God's promise, he should sleep with one of their maidservants, right? So Abraham reluctantly eventually gave up and agreed to this in order to carry out God's promise. And so he slept with his maidservant Hagar, and he had Ishmael. But in the Bible, God told Abraham that wasn't the promised son, right? That the promised son had to come by Sarah, his legitimate wife. That was the agreement, that was the promise. And so Abraham tried to thwart or to, side skirt God's plans, but eventually God fulfilled his promise. And even though Sarah was barren, she couldn't have children, she actually ended up having a child, just as God had told her and Abraham. Now that child was Isaac. That was, according to the Bible, the actual son of the promise, by which God would keep his promise and his blessings that he made on Abraham. And so I'm telling you this because the Muslims, they say that no, Ishmael, the first son, was the actual son of the promise, and they consider him as a prophet and the Ishmaelites as his descendants. And in turn, pretty much all Muslims see themselves as the descendants of Ishmael. But Israel, according to the biblical narrative, also are the actual descendants of Abraham, according to the promise, because it was Isaac who was the promised child, and that's according to the actual narrative in the Bible or even in the Torah. But it's very interesting because as horrible as the events are that are taking place right now, this war that has just started and will continue until the end, I believe, all finds its source in the Bible, because when Ishmael and Isaac were born, God told Abraham that these two lineages, these two seeds would always be in conflict against each other. And that's exactly what we're seeing taking place right now in the Middle East. The sentence of what God told Abraham, that the descendants of Ishmael and of Isaac would always be at each other's throats in hatred. And that's exactly what we're seeing. We see Israel at the center, the descendants of Isaac, and then they're surrounded by pretty much all the descendants of Ishmael, the Ishmaelites, the Muslims. And lo and behold, they hate each other. The Muslims want to completely destroy Israel. Iran is constantly making threats. A lot of people suspect that Iran might have been the one who initiated this attack we are currently seeing right now. They are the ones that are backing Hamas, is what some people think. And again, Iran has stated many a times that they are going to destroy Israel, the Jews, that they're going to wipe them from the face of the earth. Again, we've seen Israel, the Jewish people, suffer throughout the ages. The Romans destroyed Israel in 79 AD, I believe, and pretty much for 2,000 years, Israel was non-existent. All the Jews were dispersed throughout the whole world. Hitler almost exterminated them all, but lo and behold, they are now a nuclear superpower, and still we see this hatred by the Muslims people. Now, I'm looking at this from a biblical point of view, and in reality, if you go to that part of the world, all of these, this hatred really is religious in nature, right? They oppose each other, and Islam really does not mesh with Judaism, so it really is a religious war. And of course, we know that religious wars are some of the most terrible. And it's really incredible what is happening right now. And again, they're not. Israel is part of biblical prophecy. They still have their part to play in the end of days. And so, the Bible does tell us that at one point, Israel will be surrounded, ready to be destroyed by all nations. So at some point, even the U.S. will probably turn on Israel. But we know that according to biblical prophecy, that is when God is going to, come down and reveal himself as the one true God, the God of Israel. Of course, if we look at the Bible, we know that that is Jesus Christ, whom they will realize they crucified. That is the only one true God. But as of right now, the U.S. and the United Kingdom still continue to support Israel because of those biblical ties. That really is what is taking place here. This hatred that the Muslims have for them is also religious in nature. It has to do with, the biblical narrative, Isaac and Ishmael, and what God said would take place with their descendants, that they would be at each other's throats. They would have hatred towards each other, for all of their days here on earth. And again, I think that is really the source of what we are seeing here. Of course, the major news outlets, the social media, they aren't spiritual, so they fail to see what is actually taking place in the world right now. But this is huge right now. Israel is in a state of war. They have declared war. Again, they have nuclear weapons. They have better equipment than Hamas for sure. The question is, will this spread into a bigger conflict against Iran? Because then we're talking about, World War III, much like what is taking place in Ukraine. So the fact that we have everything going on in Ukraine and then now this, buckle your seatbelts and make sure you pray, because I believe we are starting to see end time events developing rather quickly. But anyways, that's my take. Those are my thoughts on the situation right now. Of course, everybody's suffering. It's a terrible thing, whether it's in Ukraine or in Israel or Hamas, anywhere. These are times of war. These are terrible times, and nobody is exempt from this. This has consequences around the world. People might not want to pay attention to it, but it's the reality, and we just need to, pray to God and trust in God that these things were prophesied of, and there is a deliverance. Love your neighbor, and love your neighbor. Treat others as you would like to be treated. Fight hate with love, and above all, have faith in God, who has promised that he is able to deliver us from all of these things that are coming upon the earth, without sounding too apocalyptic there. But anyways, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. And remember, the truth is stranger than fiction. Have a wonderful day, and God bless.